This and that and what the fuck else, episode 154. In this one I'm going to talk about the Donbas and got some disturbing gender things here, and then there is interesting thing about Coke, that is drinkable Coca-Cola, and there's a few things about the UK that will make you smile. Not a good smile, a bad smile. And a what a fuck that I think is an excellent plan, but I'll leave it up to you. Now the thing that I want to talk about first is this phone call between Xi Jinping and Zelensky. It was quite a long call, about 90 minutes. And today the transcripts came out on the Chinese government sites and Global Times, which is a Chinese newspaper, government support. But there's some things that we have to take into consideration and think about very carefully. First of all, it was Zelensky that phoned Xi Jinping. Zelensky made the call. Second point to take in consideration, Zelensky made that call without the blessing of Washington. And I've already seen articles. The Americans are not very happy about this. Now, the Western media came out with versions of what happened in that phone call. That is, in certain aspects, hilarious. It is absolutely mind-blowing, the shit that they are talking. The big thing that we have to take from this is, remember this, Xi Jinping refuses to take calls from Biden. They refuse to allow Blinken into Beijing, and the Chinese military commander is not taking the calls from the Americans. So at this point in time, there's zero communication between Beijing and Washington. And that should make everybody nervous. Now, there's a lot of stories in the Western press about what was in that call, and I'm not going to handle the whole call in detail. Alexander and Alex from the Duran discussed it in program that they released earlier. So if you want to know more about that, go and look at that program on the Duran. The big thing here is that it is quite clear that Xi Jinping told Zelensky flat out. Point number one, if you divert from the one China principle, we are going to have problems. Now the one China principle, Washington even subscribes to that, means that Taiwan is part of China. So that was the first thing that he said to Zelensky. Not the first thing, one of the things he said to Zelensky. The second thing is he said to him, he better get his ducks in a row and start talking to Russia. And if he's going to persist to allow Washington to dictate to him how to conduct himself in the Ukraine in this war, China cannot help him, because Ukraine is going to be destroyed. There's a good chance that in this whole battle situation in the Ukraine, that Ukraine is not only going to lose the eastern parts, they're going to lose chunks out of the west as well. So Xi Jinping didn't mince his words, and then he said that he will send a diplomat to Kiev, and Zelensky will send a diplomat to Beijing, and the diplomat that was selected to go to Kiev is quite an interesting choice. Sending Li Hui, one of Russia's main supporters, who worked in Moscow for 10 years and was awarded the Order of Friendship personally by Putin as an ambassador to Kiev, is a great idea for China. Now, you must understand something. At this point in time, the Chinese, they have the table when it comes to diplomacy. What they achieved between Iraq and Iran was a monumental achievement. And the Americans is not happy about that either. Now the Chinese and the Russians and Turkey is working on sorting the problems out with Syria. If they have that under control, the Americans better pack their bags in the Middle East and go home, because they're going to get themselves into trouble there. But that is their problem, that's not our problem. So this diplomat that she is sending to Kiev, he knows the Russians and he's got a good relationship with her. And Zelensky will do well to listen to this. Then we get to the Donbas, and Bakhmut specifically. And this is something that really I'm not going to show you a lot of this stuff. I've listened and watched a lot of videos of people that are now being pulled out of their basements. Try and imagine for yourself, there are of these families, some of these families that's been trapped in their homes in the basements since August last year. Listen to this. A woman who miraculously escaped from Bakhmut spoke about the horrors committed by the armed forces of Ukraine. First, a neighbor who tried to find shelter in the basement of the school died. Anna and two other women tried to save him, but a sniper opened fire on them. She witnessed how Ukrainians murdered her neighbors and friends, then a tank fired straight at her window. And then I hear dogs in my yard, and I hear a man's voice. And I risked getting my head out from the basement and looked out from a window, and I saw a red bandage on the sleeve, and then I began to bang on what was left of the window. That's how we were rescued. Think about this. And I've read some other articles. The Ukrainians called these people that were hiding in their basements, they called them waiters, because they were waiting for the Russians. It is horrible that what has happened in Bakhmut. And the more videos that are coming out of people that were trapped in that city since August, it breaks your heart. Then we get to this gender thing, and this is very disturbing. The European Union threatens Hungary with punishment for banning sexual propaganda in schools. Simply put, the EU is trying to deprive Hungarian mothers and fathers of their parental rights by falsely accusing the Hungarian government of passing discriminatory and homophobic laws. Children are not just pressured in schools, they face an insidious sexual threat from which our society suffers. As governments increasingly impose sex education on children, concerned citizens around the world are understandably against it. In Hungary specifically, the situation reached a boiling point with the passage of the Child Protection Act, which resulted in legal action being taken against the whole country. The front lines have been drawn, and the fate of millions of innocent children hangs in the balance. The European Commission, the governing body that initiated the lawsuit, stated that the Hungarian law violates EU law and the EU's fundamental rights and values. Now, my response to that is, fuck that EC. They are godless Satanists. That's what they are. And this gender thing is totally out of control. And it breaks my heart to see the stories of young children that has been caught up in this madness. And us as parents and grandparents have a responsibility to protect the children. Then listen to this madness. Just listen to it. Washington bill to allow medical transgender interventions on minors without parental consent. So this is Washington, where parents have no right to stop some woke teacher groomer from transing their children. What the fuck is wrong? Something is very wrong. And then we get this. 18-year-old boy died after doctors tried to create a vagina from part of his colon. When brainwashing and trans propaganda lead not to gender reassignment, but to death. An 18-year-old died when doctors tried to create a vagina for him using part of his colon because puberty blockers had stopped the boy's genital growth and there wasn't enough tissue to perform the surgery. Serious complications began just 24 hours later. Can you fucking imagine this? This is madness. And let's step away from that gruesome crap. Over 70% of trade between Russia and China is done in national currencies. More than 70% of trade deals between Russia and China now use either ruble or the yuan, Finance Minister Anton Sulonov said. According to the official, just 2 years ago, the number was around 30%. This is the beginning of the end of the dollar as a global currency. And then we get to this, very disturbing, from the Netherlands. Netherlands extends euthanasia to children aged 1 to 12. For fuck's sakes, think about that. Euthanasia for children aged 1 to 12. The Netherlands, the first country in the world to legalize euthanasia, will expand the list of those who have the right to voluntarily retire from life, including children aged 1 to 12 years. After a heated debate, the Netherlands Ministry of Health stated that after the adoption of the document, the right to death applies to a small group of children who suffer from incurable diseases and have no hope of improvement, and the palliative care available today is not enough to alleviate their suffering. Guys, I don't know what the hell is going on, but the world has gone mad. And then we get to this, and this was quite interesting to me, and I've been a believer of this for my whole life. I never ever touched a diet drink. Coke without sugar can lead to mental disorders, nutritionists warned. Sugar-free sodas contain fairly large doses of sweeteners such as aspartame and sorbitol. Studies have shown that regular consumption of these sweeteners in large quantities can lead to mental disorders and visual impairment. It's not a myth. There's no sugar in Coke that says 0 calories or no sugar on it. But it does use a sugar substitute, which is even worse in its effect on the body than pure sugar. Usually Coca-Cola uses sweeteners such as aspartame, either sorbitol or saccharin. There are a number of studies that have shown that regular consumption of aspartame can cause behavioral and mood disorders and even affects visual acuity and eye health in general. A nutritionist recommended drinking regular sodas. I think there's a translation problem here, but in any case, I have seen it with my own wife. She switched to Tab, and that was about 25 years ago. And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but she started complaining a lot about migraine. And not a day went by that she didn't have migraine. And then one day I spoke to a friend of mine that's a doctor, and I said to him, I can't understand this. And he said to me, does she drink sugar-free sodas? And I said, yes. And he said, she must stop that. I discussed it with my wife, and after a lot of Hana, she stopped that. And amazingly enough, within a week, migraine's gone. So apparently, your body, although they tell you how bad sugar is, your body knows what to do with that sugar when it gets into your bloodstream. Your body doesn't know what to do with these artificial. And then we get to Russia. Now we all know about this latest spate of terrorist attacks on Belgorod and the homes that has been bombed there and destroyed. It is, I cannot put it into words, but the Ukrainians are looking for big shit. That's all that I'm going to say. New housing was provided to 30 residents in the Belgorod region whose homes were affected by Ukrainian bombing. 1,376 out of 1,752 owners of the damaged houses have already received new housing. This week we are planning to hand over the keys. So far 11 families have moved into the new housing. That is what Russia does for its citizens. And then this, I'm just throwing this in for that Nazi stalker of mine that is a very big fan of Navalny. Navalny said that he was charged with terrorism and faces life imprisonment, given the activities of a number of members of Navalny's gang, who have all the signs of the actions of a terrorist organization. The extension of Navalny's term looks quite likely. Now, there is lots of stories, and I've spoken to Russian people about Navalny, and they told me this guy was paid by the CIA to stir up shit in Moscow. And the FSB caught him with the money in his hands. So, Navalny got what he deserves. Then we get to this, sanctions. Russia's industrial production up 1.2% in March from a year earlier, versus an expected slump of 1.4%. Sectors like finished metal goods, which includes arms and ammunition, grew 30%, while computers and electronics increased 23%. Other transport sector, which covers combat vehicles, aircraft and ships, up from more than 10% for 2 months in a row. And that is the results of all the sanctions, and I think Russia is doing well. And then there's more on that, and I'm not going to read all of it. You can stop it if you want to study it properly. LNG production in Russia in March was the highest for the year, 2.9 million tons. Gold output in Russia increased by 26.5%. Coal production in Russia decreased by 2.5%. Russia increased gasoline production by 11.4%. Gas production in Russia in the first quarter fell by 14% to 149 billion cubic meters. In March, increased by 6.4% compared to February. Primary aluminium output in Russia in March increased by 11% year on year. So the Russian economy is doing well. And then we have this. Now we're all aware of that fiasco in Sudan. And again, I'm not going to read all of it. You can stop this and study it properly. But it is it's called Sudan Cliff Notes. And it gives you a roadmap of how the Americans were involved in the Sudan since August last year. And then in February this year, Sudan confirms the deal for a Russian naval base. Key players were Lavrov and Burhan. February 16, Biden admin sends $288 million in humanitarian aid to Sudan. March, Victoria Nuland visits Sudan. April, conflict escalates between the Sudanese armed forces. So that American hand is there. The following one, I'm just putting in here to show you the madness of social media. Now, we all heard that Erdogan wasn't well, and then there were stories that he suffered a massive heart attack, and then there were stories that he is busy dying, his family was summoned to come and see him and so forth. And then late last night I saw this. Unconfirmed reports that Turkish president has been poisoned after a meeting with a Russian official. How's that? In any case, today it appears that Erdogan had a little bit of a upset stomach, and he was fit, and this afternoon he was in a video conference with Putin. And then we get to the UK. Now this, you must just listen to it and make up your own mind. Here's a smashing story. That phone alert, which cost the taxpayer £6.5 million, was contracted to Fujitsu. They subcontracted it out to the company called Infosys. A woman owns it. Here's her husband. And Rishi Sunak. Now, just for those that don't understand, they did a test where the British government sent an alert out to every cell phone in England. They test the system to see if they could communicate with all at one shot. And then there's more from the UK. The UK will be held responsible for turning Ukraine into a radioactive landfill. Russia's UK embassy said London would be held responsible for transferring toxic depleted uranium tank ammunition to Ukraine after the British Defence Ministry confirmed the radioactive shells were already in Kiev's hands. It has by now become self-evident that the West intends Ukraine to become not only an anti-Russian military shooting range, but also a radioactive landfill, and with all the ensuing grave consequences for the health of residents and the environment in the region, the official statement read. Shockingly, against the background, the US Defense Ministry does not seem to realize the extent of the hypocrisy of their clerical assurances that London intends to lay the groundwork for a successful post-conflict reconstruction of Ukraine. Now, my Nazi stalker, he is quite happy about this depleted uranium shells, and he reckons that it is a lie that that stuff is dangerous. And more from the Ukraine. Now the following, I'm not so sure if it is, nobody is really sure if this was true or not true, but Bild reported it. Ukrainian Secret Service tried to kill Russian President Vladimir Putin with a kamikaze drone on Sunday. And I saw images of the drone crashing, that crashed near Moscow and so forth, but this Bild is the only guys that have been running with that story, and apparently Bild is fairly renowned for being very close to pony paper. Then we get to South Africa. John Baloyi posted this after President Ramaphosa made a bloody speech in which he said the ANC inherited a broken country. Ramaphosa is lying that the ANC inherited a broken country. In 1994, Eskom, Transnet, Spoornet, Eskom, Sasol and SAA were not broken. The Nel was world class. Post office was functioning. No potholes. Yes, all these organizations were serving the minority, but they were not broken. And that is the truth. And more from South Africa, and this was something that I picked up late last night, and it was published in Bulawayo. But in South Africa, there's not a word about this. Ramaphosa is building a concrete border wall between South Africa and Mozambique. And there's not a word in our press about that. I wonder why. And then we get to that what a fuck moment. And I'm just going to show you the image, and you can look at that image and use your imagination. For me, I think it is a pretty piece of equipment that. And it could be very functional. So, let your mind go. And on that note, please, thank you for your support. Give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. And in the description below the video is the alternative places where I will publish stuff if my mouth gets slapped closed here again. And there is also a link if you feel like you want to support the channel financially. I would appreciate that. But for now, let's think about that machine and smile. Thank you.